3 days. That's how long the lone rider had been in the saddle when the valley first opened before him. Canyons gave way to sudden green mountains rising like silent walls on 3 sides, a creek slicing silver through the grass. In the center stood the farmhouse, solid white waiting barn and corral sharp against the afternoon light. Everything he had bled 5 years to own. But on the wide front porch, 3 women stood motionless. No wave, no greeting, only the wind tugging at their dresses and the faint groan of weathered boards as the tallest one stepped forward. Her shadow stretched long across the yard, their eyes locked on him with a cold measuring weight that made the horse shift uneasily beneath him. His fingers brushed the stock of his rifle. The air thickened. Something unspoken crackled between them, and the fresh start he had ridden so far to claim suddenly felt like the jaws of a trap beginning to close. 3 days. That's how long Bennett Ash had been in the saddle when he first caught sight of the valley. 3 days of riding through country that got lonelier with each mile. Through canyon passes where the walls pressed in close enough to block out the sun. Across dry riverbeds that hadn't seen water since spring. Past abandoned homesteads where doors hung open and window glass lay shattered in the dirt. 3 days with nothing but his horse for company. And his thoughts, which were worse company than silence. Bennett was 35 years old. Old enough to have seen things that aged a man beyond his years. Young enough that some part of him still believed in fresh starts, still believed that a man could outrun his past if he rode far enough. The land deed sat in his saddlebag, folded careful, protected from the dust and sweat. $2,200, every cent he'd saved in 5 years of working cattle ranches from Wyoming to Colorado. 5 years of dawn to dusk labor, of sleeping in bunkhouses that smelled like unwashed men and old tobacco, of keeping his head down and his mouth shut and his money hidden in a tin can under his bunk. 5 years building toward this moment, toward land that belonged to him, toward a life where he answered to nobody. The war had taken that from him, the ability to be his own man. 4 years of following orders, of marching where they told him, fighting where they pointed, killing men whose faces he couldn't remember but whose screams still woke him some nights. Antietam had been the worst. No, Gettysburg had been the worst. Actually, they'd all been the worst in different ways. Bennett shook his head, pushed the memories down where they belonged, buried deep, locked tight. This was supposed to be his escape from all that. This valley, this farm, this fresh start that a man named Ezekiel Voss had sold him in a Denver saloon 6 weeks ago. Prime cattle country, Ezekiel had said, smiling that easy smile, white teeth flashing. I'd keep it myself, but I got family in California. Opportunity there, you understand. But this land, he'd tapped the deed, this land will make you rich if you work it right. Bennett had been suspicious at first. Land this good didn't just get sold in saloons to strangers. But Ezekiel had papers, legal documents, a surveyor's map. Everything looked legitimate. And Bennett had been ready, so ready to stop drifting, to stop working for other men's dreams, to build something of his own. He'd paid cash, right there in the saloon, counted out $2,200 in bills and coins, while Ezekiel watched with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. You won't regret this, Ezekiel had said. Bennett was starting to think he might. The valley opened up before him now, wide, green in a way that surprised him, mountains rising on 3 sides, a creek cutting through the western edge, grazing land that rolled gentle toward stands of pine and aspen. It was beautiful, more beautiful than the map had suggested. The farmhouse sat in the center, 2 stories, white paint that had weathered to gray in places but still looked solid, a barn that stood square and true, corrals with new-looking fence posts, fields that showed signs of cultivation. This was real. This was actually real. Bennett allowed himself a moment, just one moment, to feel something like hope. Then he saw them. Doc, 3 women standing on the front porch, just standing there, still as statues, watching him approach. Bennett's hand drifted toward his rifle, slow, casual, not wanting to seem threatening but wanting to be ready, just in case. The woman in the middle was tall, taller than most men Bennett knew, 6 feet easy, maybe more. Shoulders broad as a blacksmith's, arms that showed muscle built from years of hard work. Dark hair pulled back severe from a face that was handsome in a harsh way. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes that measured him like a rancher measuring livestock. She stepped forward. The porch boards groaned under her weight. "You must be Bennett Ash," she said. Her voice carried across the yard without strain, deep, controlled, the kind of voice that expected obedience. Bennett reined in his horse, 20 feet from the porch, close enough to talk, far enough to run if needed. "I am," he said, keeping his voice level. "And you are?" "Rowena Blackwood." She gestured to the woman on her left, also tall, brown hair, quieter demeanor but no less imposing. "This is Cora Drummond." Then to her right, red hair catching the afternoon sun, green eyes that sparked with something Bennett couldn't quite name. "And Marin Sinclair." All three watched him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "We've been waiting for you," Rowena said. The afternoon suddenly felt too quiet, too still. Bennett's horse shifted beneath him, sensing his tension. "Waiting," Bennett repeated. "Why would you be waiting for me?" Rowena's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because Ezekiel Voss told us you were coming." She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a folded paper. "Because you're going to honor the agreement he made with us." Bennett's stomach dropped. Not a welcoming committee. A trap. "I don't know what agreement you're talking about," he said, his hand closing around the rifle stock now, not drawing it, not yet. "But I own this land, legal and proper. Got the deed right here to prove it." He patted his saddlebag with his free hand. Rowena's expression didn't change. "Oh, we know you have the deed," she said, her voice carrying an edge now. "We watched Ezekiel sell this place right out from under us. Watched him take money that should have been ours, money we earned with our own sweat." She unfolded the paper, held it up so Bennett could see the official seal at the bottom. "But Ezekiel signed something else before he left, something that transfers all his obligations to whoever bought this property." The trap was closing. Bennett could feel it. "What kind of obligations?" Cora spoke for the first time, her voice softer than Rowena's, but firm, no hesitation. "Partnership obligations," she said. "Working this land together, sharing the profits equally, building something that lasts." She paused, met his eyes directly. "And sharing our lives." The way she emphasized that last part, the deliberate weight she put on those words, Bennett understood exactly what they meant, what they expected. His mouth went dry. "Now hold on," he said, dismounting slowly, keeping his movements deliberate, non-threatening. His rifle stayed in the saddle scabbard, but his hand didn't move far from it. "I bought land, just land. I didn't buy people. And nobody can sign a contract that obligates someone else to that." Marin laughed. It wasn't friendly, not warm, just bitter and hard. "You really don't understand where you are, do you?" She leaned against the porch railing, casual, but her eyes never left him. "This isn't Denver. This isn't civilization. We're 3 days from the nearest sheriff, 4 days from any court that might care what happens out here." She gestured to the valley around them. "Out here, contracts mean whatever we say they mean. Law is whatever we make it. And right now," she smiled, sharp, "right now the law says you owe us." Bennett's heart hammered against his ribs. This couldn't be happening. He'd been careful, checked the papers, made sure everything was legal. "I'm not threatening you," Rowena said, her tone shifting, becoming almost reasonable. "We're not threatening you. We're just explaining reality." She descended the porch steps, one at a time, each one deliberate. Bennett fought the urge to step back. Rowena stopped 5 feet away, held out the paper. "Read it yourself." Bennett took it, his hands not quite steady. The document looked official. Heavy paper, multiple signatures, wax seals that appeared genuine, legal language that twisted and turned in ways that made his head hurt. But one clause stood out, clear as a brand on cattle. "Any transfer of property ownership shall include transfer of all partnership commitments herein described, including but not limited to shared residence, shared labor, shared profits, and shared companionship between all parties involved in said partnership." Shared companionship. Bennett read it again, then a third time, hoping the words would change. They didn't. "This can't be legal," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Because out here, 3 days from any law, maybe it was." "Legal enough," Rowena replied. "And more importantly, it's the reality you're facing. Ezekiel didn't just sell you land, Mr. Ash. He sold you into an arrangement, whether you like it or not." Bennett's mind raced. Options. He needed options. Right away, cut his losses, go back to working for wages, except he'd spent everything on this land. Everything. He had maybe $40 left in his pockets, not enough to start over anywhere. Stay and fight it. Take them to court. Prove the contract was coerced or fraudulent, except the nearest court was in Blackwater. 2 days' ride, and courts cost money. Lawyer money, money he didn't have, stay and accept their terms. That option made something in his chest tighten. Not because the women were unattractive. They weren't. Strong faces, capable looking, the kind of women who could survive out here where softer folk would break. But because he hadn't chosen this. Because someone else had decided his fate. Because after 4 years of the army taking every choice from him, he'd thought buying land meant freedom. Turned out freedom was more complicated than a deed. "There's something else you should know," Cora said, her tone almost apologetic. "Ezekiel didn't just leave us with a contract." Of course there was more. There was always more. "He left us with debt," Cora continued. "Substantial debt." Bennett closed his eyes, breathed through his nose. "How much?" Rowena's jaw tightened. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. $6,500. The number hit Bennett like a physical blow. $6,500. What in God's name could cost $6,000 out here? His voice came out strangled. "Equipment," Marin said, pushing off from the porch railing, coming down the steps to stand beside Rowena. "Livestock, supplies, building materials. Ezekiel borrowed from Magnus Greer, the merchant in Blackwater. Used this property as collateral." The trap wasn't just closing, it was locked, sealed, buried. "So, let me understand this," Bennett said slowly, his mind trying to process. "I didn't just buy land. I bought land that's already mortgaged, to someone I've never met, for money I didn't borrow, for goods I never received." "That's about right," Rowena confirmed. Bennett wanted to laugh, or scream, or get back on his horse and ride until the horse gave out and then keep walking. "And Magnus Greer doesn't care who borrowed the money," he said. "Not a question, a statement." "Magnus only cares that it gets paid," Cora said. "And if it doesn't—" She looked at Rowena, who finished the thought. "He takes the land, and us." Bennett's head snapped up. "Takes you." "We signed the loan papers," Cora explained, her voice flat, emotionless, like she was talking about the weather. "Our names are on them alongside Ezekiel's. If the debt isn't paid, Magnus can claim us as indentured laborers. 5 years of unpaid work. That couldn't be legal." Except Bennett had seen enough of frontier law to know that legal and right were often strangers to each other. "When is the debt due?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to know. 4 weeks, Rowena said. 4 weeks, 28 days, to come up with $6,500. Or lose everything. Bennett looked at the farmhouse, the barn, the fields stretching toward the mountains, his fresh start, his escape, his prison. "I need to think," he said, his voice coming from somewhere far away. "I need time to figure this out." Rowena nodded once. "You can stay in the house tonight, guest room upstairs. We won't bother you." She turned toward the door, paused with her hand on the frame. "But Bennett running won't help. Ezekiel already has your money, and we already have your name on that contract. Whether you like it or not, we're bound together now." She went inside. Cora followed. Marin gave him one last long look before she too disappeared into the house. The door closed behind them. Bennett stood in the yard, alone except for his horse, and the weight of a trap he hadn't seen coming. The sun was setting when Bennett finally moved. His legs felt stiff, his mind numb. He unsaddled his horse, slow, methodical, gave the animal water from the trough, grain from the barn, brushed him down proper, taking his time, putting off the moment when he'd have to go inside. The barn was well maintained, clean, organized, everything in its place. Tack hung on proper pegs, tools stored neat, hay stacked careful, the work of people who cared, who took pride, who'd built something here. Bennett had to admit that much. Whatever else they were, these women weren't lazy, weren't careless. They'd worked this land, made it better, and Ezekiel had sold it out from under them. That didn't make Bennett feel better about the trap. But it complicated his anger, made it harder to see them as the enemy. When he couldn't put it off any longer, Bennett walked to the house. The front door was unlocked. He stepped inside. The interior was nicer than he'd expected. Wood floors swept clean, walls that had been recently whitewashed, furniture that showed care, a braided rug in the main room, curtains on the windows. A home. Not just a structure. A home. Cora appeared from what must be the kitchen. She carried a tray, bread, cheese, something that smelled like stew. "Thought you might be hungry," she said. "You've been riding for days." Bennett nodded, didn't trust his voice. She set the tray on the table. "Your room is upstairs. First door on the right. Water for washing. Clean linens. She paused. We're not your enemies, Bennett. I know it doesn't feel that way right now, but we're not. She left before he could respond. Bennett sat at the table, ate without tasting, his mind going in circles, looking for a way out that didn't exist. When he finished, he climbed the stairs, found the room Cora had mentioned, small, clean, a bed that looked handmade but solid, a wash basin, a window that overlooked the eastern fields, a lamp already lit on the bedside table. Bennett closed the door behind him, set his rifle against the wall, sat on the bed, stared at nothing. Outside the window, the last light faded from the sky. Stars appeared, bright and cold and indifferent to the problems of men who made bad choices. Bennett had made a bad choice, trusted too easy, wanted too much, and now he was paying for it. He pulled out the deed, read it again by lamplight. Property transferred from Ezekiel Voss to Bennett Ash, $2,200, paid in full, all rights and privileges thereof granted to said Bennett Ash. Rights and privileges. What a joke. He'd bought the right to inherit someone else's debts, someone else's obligations, someone else's tangled mess. The smart thing would be to leave. Tonight. While they slept. Take his horse, ride back toward Denver, find work. Start over with the $40 in his pocket and whatever pride he had left. Bennett had started over before. After the war ended and he'd found himself standing in a field in Virginia with nothing but his rifle and the clothes on his back. After his parents died of fever the winter he turned 23. After every friend he'd made in the Army ended up dead in a ditch somewhere between Maryland and Pennsylvania, he could start over again. Except he was so tired of starting over, so tired of running, so tired of being alone. The war had done that to him, made solitude feel like safety, made other people feel like potential threats, made trust feel like weakness. He'd thought buying isolated land was the answer. Thought if he just got far enough from other people he could stop hurting, stop remembering, stop waking up in the middle of the night with the sound of artillery in his ears and the smell of blood in his nose. But sitting here in this small room in this house built by 3 women he didn't know, Bennett wondered if isolation was actually what he needed or just what he was afraid to admit he didn't want. A knock on the door interrupted his spiral. "Come in," he said, his voice rough. Cora entered, still dressed, hair still pulled back though a few strands had escaped. She looked tired, older than she probably was, the way frontier life aged everyone. She sat in the chair by the window without asking permission, just sat, looked at him. "I know this isn't fair to you," she said finally. "What Ezekiel did, trapping you like this, using you to settle his debts and his promises." "Then why do it?" Bennett asked. Not angry, just tired. "Why not just let me go, find someone else?" Cora was quiet for a long moment. "Because there is no one else," she said. "This valley. It's 3 days from Blackwater, 4 days from any other settlement. The only people who come out here are running from something, or looking for something they can't find anywhere else." She met his eyes. "And most of them aren't decent." "You think I'm decent? I think you haven't hurt us yet, and you've had opportunities." Cora leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Ezekiel was decent too, at first, charming, kind, said all the right things, promised us everything we wanted." "What changed?" Cora's expression hardened. "He did. About 6 months in, started drinking heavy, started gambling, started borrowing money against the land we'd improved with our own hands, our own sweat." She shook her head. "Then one morning we woke up and he was gone. Took every cent from the cattle sale. Left us with $6,000 in debt and a contract that said whoever bought next would inherit his obligations." Bennett absorbed that. "He planned this," he said slowly. "From the beginning. This was always his exit strategy." "We figured that out too." Cora's voice went bitter. "About 2 days after he left, when we found his other contracts, his other promises to other women in other territories." Bennett's stomach turned. "How many?" "At least 7 that we found evidence of. Probably more." Cora stood, moved toward the door. "I'm not asking you to love us, Bennett. I'm not even asking you to like us. But I am asking you to stay. Help us pay the debt. After that," she shrugged, "we can figure out the rest, or not. Your choice." She left, closed the door quiet behind her. Bennett sat in the silence, thought about decent men and bad choices, about women who'd been used and abandoned, about traps that didn't feel like traps until they'd already closed. The coffee Cora had brought earlier was still warm. Bennett drank it. bitter and strong. Like everything else about this situation, he could leave, should leave. Any sensible man would leave. But Bennett found himself thinking about that barn, so carefully maintained, about the fields he'd glimpsed, so well tended, about this house, so clean and cared for, about 3 women who'd been betrayed, who were now desperate, who'd resorted to trapping a stranger because they had no other options. And Bennett realized something. He understood desperation, understood being backed into a corner with no good choices, understood doing questionable things to survive. The war had taught him that much. He lay back on the bed, stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd have to decide. Tonight, he was just tired. So tired. Morning came too early. Bennett woke to the sound of roosters crowing, chickens clucking, the bang of a screen door somewhere below. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then it all came back. The farm, the debt, the trap. He dressed quickly, splashed water on his face from the basin, checked his rifle out of habit, though he had no intention of using it. Downstairs, the kitchen was already busy. Rowena stood at the stove, cooking eggs in a cast-iron pan. The smell made Bennett's stomach growl despite his anxiety. Marin sat at the table, sharpening a knife, the rhythmic scrape of metal on whetstone. Cora was nowhere visible. "She's checking the cattle," Rowena said without turning around, like she'd read his mind. "We've got 35 head, not a fortune, but good stock." Bennett stood in the doorway, uncertain. "Sit," Rowena commanded. Not harsh, just matter of fact. Bennett sat. Marin kept sharpening. Didn't look at him, just kept that knife moving across the stone in smooth, practiced strokes. "I didn't run," Bennett said. "We noticed," Marin replied, still not looking up. "That's a good sign." "Is it? Means you're considering staying." Rowena brought plates to the table. Eggs, bacon, fresh bread still warm. "Means maybe you're not as selfish as Ezekiel." Bennett wanted to argue, to say that not running didn't mean he was staying, that he hadn't decided anything yet. But the food smelled too good, and he was too hungry, and arguing seemed pointless. He ate. The food was excellent, better than excellent, the kind of cooking that spoke of years of practice, of caring about details, of taking pride in even simple things. "Ezekiel told us about you," Rowena said, sitting across from him with her own plate. "Before he left. Said you were a veteran. Union Army. Fought at Antietam." Bennett's hand tightened on his fork. "He had no right telling you that. Also said you fought at Gettysburg." Rowena's expression softened slightly. "That you were looking to get away from people. That you wanted isolation, peace." She took a bite of eggs, chewed, swallowed. "I understand that," she continued. "The wanting to be alone, the needing space from other people. But Bennett—" She met his eyes. "This valley is the most isolated place in the territory. 3 days from anywhere, and it's still not empty, because we're here, and we're not leaving." Marin finally looked up from her knife. "This land," she said, "we've worked it for 18 months. We dug those irrigation channels you saw. We built that chicken coop. We broke those horses. We planted those fields." "Every improvement you can see," Rowena added. "We made it. Ezekiel took credit, signed his name, played the man. But the work was ours." Bennett set down his fork. "Show me," he said. Rowena raised an eyebrow. "Show you what?" "Everything. The whole farm. All the improvements you're talking about." Bennett pushed his plate away. "If I'm going to make any kind of decision, I need to see what I'm deciding about." Rowena stood, grabbed her hat from a peg by the door. "All right, then." She opened the door. "Let's show you what you bought." The irrigation system was impressive, more than impressive. It was brilliant. Channels dug by hand, lined with carefully placed stones, feeding water from the creek to 3 separate fields in a network that showed real understanding of water flow and grade. "Cora designed this," Rowena explained, walking along the main channel, her boots leaving prints in the damp soil. Her father was a blacksmith back in Ohio, taught her about metals and mechanics, how things work, how to make systems that last. Bennett knelt beside one of the channels, examined the stonework up close. Each stone fitted precise, sealed with clay, built to last decades. "This represents months of work," he said. 4 months, Marin confirmed, standing with her arms crossed. "Ezekiel complained the whole time, said it was too much effort for too little return, that we should just let the fields flood naturally when the creek ran high." Bennett shook his head. "Natural flooding doesn't work in August, when the creek drops. You need controlled irrigation to get crops through late summer." "Exactly what Cora told him," Rowena said. a hint of pride in her voice. They moved to the cattle pastures. 35 head of mixed breeds, all healthy-looking, grazing on good grass that showed signs of careful pasture management. "We bought these with our own money," Marin said. "Pooled everything we'd saved from working other ranches, other jobs. Ezekiel said he'd match it. Buy another 30 head. Make us a real operation." She laughed, bitter. "Never did. Spent that money on whiskey and gambling in Blackwater instead." Bennett counted the cattle, estimated their value, maybe $3,000 worth. Not enough to cover a $6,000 debt, but substantial, real. "What about crops?" he asked. Rowena led him to the wheat fields, 2 full acres. The wheat just starting to head out, green and healthy. "We planted in April," she said. "Should be ready for harvest in 7 or 8 weeks. This soil is better than we expected. Should get a good yield." 7 weeks. 3 weeks after the debt came due. "Magnus won't wait for the harvest," Bennett said. "No," Rowena agreed. "He won't." They walked back toward the house, Bennett's mind calculating despite himself. 35 cattle at maybe $80 each. 2,800. The wheat harvest. Another 1,000 if they got lucky. Maybe 1,200 if they got very lucky and found a good buyer. Still short. Way short. "There's more," Cora said. She'd appeared from the barn, wiping her hands on a rag. "Something we haven't told you yet." Of course there was more. Bennett braced himself. "What?" Cora exchanged glances with Rowena, who nodded. "Ezekiel didn't just borrow 6,000, Cora said. He also signed over first rights to all our production, our cattle, our crops, everything." Bennett closed his eyes. "To Magnus." "To Magnus," Cora confirmed. "At prices Magnus sets." The trap wasn't just closed, it was welded shut. "So even if we harvest the wheat and sell the cattle," Bennett said slowly, "working it through, Magnus controls what we get paid. He can offer pennies on the dollar, and we'd have no legal recourse." "That's the situation," Rowena said. Bennett sat down on the porch steps, put his head in his hands. 3 women stood watching him, waiting. He could feel their eyes, their hope, their desperation. "This is impossible," he said finally. "Yes," Rowena agreed simply. "Ezekiel set this up deliberately, to fail, so Magnus could take the land for a fraction of its value." "We think so too." Bennett looked up at 3 women who'd been lied to, used, abandoned, left holding debts they couldn't pay and promises they hadn't made. Women who were now trapped, just like him. And something shifted in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time, not since the war. The stubborn, stupid refusal to let bad men win, the rage that came from watching innocent people get crushed by the cruel and the greedy, the determination that had kept him alive through 4 years of hell. "All right," he said, standing up. "Here's what we're going to do." All 3 women leaned in. "First, I need complete honesty about everything. The debt, the farm, the contract, Ezekiel, Magnus, all of it. No more surprises." Rowena nodded. "Agreed." "Second, we work together, as partners, real partners, equal say and decisions." Cora smiled slightly. "Third," Bennett met each of their eyes in turn. "About the companionship clause. I'm not agreeing to anything right now. That's something that happens naturally, if it happens at all. Not because of some contract. Understood?" Marin grinned. "Understood." "And fourth," Bennett took a breath, "we're going to save this farm. I don't know how yet. But Ezekiel and Magnus don't get to win, not after what they did to you." Rowena extended her hand. Strong, calloused, honest. "Partners, then," she said. Bennett shook it. Her grip was firm. "Partners," he agreed. For the first time since arriving, Bennett felt something other than panic. He felt purpose. That afternoon they sat around the kitchen table, papers spread out before them. The loan documents from Magnus, the partnership agreement Ezekiel had signed, the deed, the land survey, everything. Bennett studied it all, looking for loopholes, weaknesses, anything they could use. "Magnus is coming in 4 weeks, Rowena said. "He always collects in person, makes a show of it, brings men with him." "Why?" Bennett asked. "Because he's a bully," Marin said flatly. "He enjoys watching people squirm, enjoys the power." Bennett made a note on the scrap of paper he'd been using. "Then we need to have the full amount ready. Not ask for an extension, not negotiate, just pay and be done." $6,500, Cora said. In 4 weeks. The number hung heavy in the air. Impossible. They all knew it, but nobody said it. We've got 2,800 in cattle, Bennett said, writing it down. Maybe 1,000 in wheat if we can harvest early and sell to someone other than Magnus. 3,800, Rowena calculated. We're still short 2,700. Bennett tapped his pencil against the table, thinking, what about selling half the cattle now before the debt is due? Get cash in hand. To who? Marin asked. The only buyer in range is Magnus, and he'll lowball us, offer half what they're worth, because he knows we're desperate. Right, of course. What if we drove them somewhere else? Cora suggested. Blackwater's not the only town. There's Copperfield, 4 days northwest, or Red Creek, 5 days east. 4 days there, 4 days back. Rowena shook her head. That's 8 days minimum. We don't have 8 days to spare, not with farm work that needs doing. Bennett's frustration mounted. Every solution ran into a wall. Every plan had a fatal flaw. There has to be something, he muttered, more to himself than them. Some way to get $2,700 in 4 weeks. Silence settled over the table. Heavy. Oppressive. Then Marin spoke. Quietly. Hesitant. There's gold. Everyone looked at her. What gold? Rowena demanded. North of here, up in the hills. Marin's expression was serious. Ezekiel found a deposit. Small. Not worth filing a claim. But he pulled out maybe $200 worth before he stopped going. Bennett's pulse quickened despite himself. How much do you think is left? I don't know. Marin shrugged. Maybe more. Maybe nothing. But Ezekiel quit after a month. Said it was too much work for too little return. Because Ezekiel was lazy, Cora said, disgust in her voice, and impatient. If there was easy money to be made, he'd have stripped it. But hard work? She shook her head. Not his style. Bennett stood, paced to the window, looked out at the valley, at the mountains rising to the north. Show me, he said, turning back to them. Show me where this gold is. Now, Rowena asked. No time like now. They saddled horses. All 4 of them. Rode north as the sun climbed toward its peak. The land got rougher as they went. Flatter grazing country giving way to foothills. Foothills giving way to steep slopes covered in pine and scrub oak. Marin led them up a narrow canyon. Water trickled through the bottom. Not much, just enough to keep the rocks wet. There, she said, pointing to a spot where the canyon bent, where the creek had carved a small pool. Ezekiel found color in the gravel. Spent 3 weeks digging before he gave up. Bennett dismounted, walked to the creek edge. The others followed. He knelt in the cold water, scooped up a handful of gravel and sand, swirled it in his palm the way he'd seen prospectors do. Most of the lighter material washed away, leaving heavier sediment, and there, glinting in the sunlight, gold. Not much, just a few tiny flakes, but real. This could work, he said. Rowena crouched beside him. Could work, but gold mining is hard labor, backbreaking, and slow. We still need to run the farm, take care of the cattle, maintain the crops. So we work in shifts, Bennett said, standing, brushing water from his hands. 2 people up here digging, 2 people at the farm, rotate every other day, keep everything moving. Cora looked doubtful. Even working full-time, I don't know if we can pull out $2,700 in gold in 4 weeks. That's a lot of gold. Do we have another option? Bennett asked. No one answered, because they didn't. This was it, their only shot. We start tomorrow, Bennett said. Dawn, bring shovels, pans, buckets, anything we can use to move gravel. Marin looked at the creek, at the narrow canyon, at the enormous amount of earth they'd need to move. Gold mining it is then, she said. They rode back to the farm as afternoon shadows lengthened, Bennett's mind already working through logistics. 4 weeks, $2,700, 3 women he barely knew, and a debt that would destroy them if they failed. But for the first time since arriving, something had settled in Bennett's chest. Not certainty, not confidence, just determination. They weren't going to fail. He wouldn't allow it. That evening, Bennett stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley. The land looked peaceful in the fading light, beautiful even. The kind of place a man could build a life, if circumstances were different, if he hadn't walked into a trap. Behind him he heard the sounds of the women preparing dinner, the clank of pots, the murmur of conversation, the easy rhythm of people who'd learned to work together. Bennett thought about that, about partnership, real partnership, Not the forced kind Ezekiel's contract demanded, but the kind built on mutual respect, shared struggle, common purpose. Maybe that's what they could become. If they survived the next 4 weeks, if they paid the debt, if they didn't kill each other first. The door opened behind him. Rowena stepped out, stood beside him at the railing. She didn't speak right away, just looked out at the same view. Finally, she said, "You didn't have to stay." Bennett glanced at her. "I know. You could have left, taken your losses, started over somewhere else with what little you had left." "I thought about it," Bennett admitted. "But you didn't." "No." Rowena was quiet for a moment. "Why?" she asked. Bennett considered the question, really considered it. "Because I'm tired of running," he said finally. "I spent 5 years after the war running. From memories, from people, from anything that might hurt, from anything that might matter." He turned to face her fully. "And I'm tired of it. Tired of being alone. Tired of being afraid. Tired of thinking that isolation is the same as safety." Rowena's expression softened. "We've been hurt too," she said quietly. "By Ezekiel. By men before him. By a world that tells women they're only valuable if they have a man to speak for them, to give them legitimacy." She leaned against the railing. "But we're not looking for someone to save us, Bennett. We're looking for someone to stand with us, to work beside us, to treat us like equals instead of property." "I understand that," Bennett said. "Do you—" Rowena's eyes were intense. "Because that companionship clause, it's not about Ezekiel's twisted fantasy. It's about survival, about having someone who won't leave when things get hard, about building something real that lasts." Bennett held her gaze. "I need time," he said, "to trust, to know you, to know if this is real or just desperation making us both see what we want to see." Rowena nodded slowly. "That's fair," she said. "More than fair, actually. But understand this. We're not waiting forever. We already wasted 18 months on Ezekiel, on his lies and his promises and his charm." She straightened. "If you're not serious about being here, about being part of this, then leave now, before we get attached, before it hurts worse." The honesty hit Bennett hard, raw and real and painful. "I'm serious about saving the farm," he said, "about paying the debt, about not letting Magnus and Ezekiel win. Beyond that—" He shook his head. "I don't know yet. I need to see how the next 4 weeks go. See if we can actually work together. See if this partnership is real or just another trap with better intentions." Rowena studied his face, searching for something. After a long moment, she nodded. "Then that's where we start," she said. "With the work, with the partnership, with proving we can trust each other." She moved toward the door, paused with her hand on the frame. "Thank you, Bennett," she said without looking back. "For staying, for trying. That's more than most men would do." She went inside, left Bennett alone on the porch. The last light faded from the sky. Stars appeared one by one, bright and cold and distant. Bennett thought about the war, about all the times he'd stood watch while other men slept, alone with his thoughts and his fears and his memories. He'd thought buying land would end that loneliness. Turned out it just changed the shape of it, made it more complicated, more human, more real. Inside the house he heard laughter, something Marin said, Cora's response, Rowena's deep chuckle, the sound of people who'd become family through shared hardship. Bennett wondered if he could become part of that, if 4 broken people could somehow make each other whole. Tomorrow they'd start digging for gold, start the real work of survival. Tonight he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Fragile and uncertain, but real. As real as the land beneath his feet, as real as the debt hanging over their heads, as real as 3 women who'd offered him partnership in the only way they knew how. Bennett took one last look at the valley, at the land he'd bought without knowing what it would cost. Then he went inside, to plan, to prepare, to face whatever the next 4 weeks would bring, together, for better or worse. They were in this together now. Dawn came cold and unforgiving. Bennett woke to darkness, to the sound of someone moving downstairs, pots clanking, the stove being lit. He dressed in the dark, pulled on his boots, grabbed his rifle more from habit than necessity. Downstairs, Rowena already had coffee brewing, strong, black, the kind that could wake the dead. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Bennett shook his head. "Too much thinking." "Thinking doesn't pay debts," Rowena said. But her tone was gentle, understanding. Working does. Cora appeared from outside, carrying eggs from the henhouse, her breath visible in the morning chill. "Marin's loading the horses," she said. "Shovels, pans, food for the day." They ate quickly. Eggs and bread. Nobody talking much. The weight of what they were about to attempt sat heavy on all of them. 4 weeks to find $2,700 in gold. In a creek that had already been partially worked. By 4 people who'd never done serious prospecting. Impossible. Except they had no choice. "Bennett and I will take the first shift," Rowena said, draining her coffee. "You two handle the farm, check the cattle, water the crops. We'll swap out tomorrow." Marin nodded. "Don't break your backs up there," she said. "We need you functional." Rowena smiled grimly. "We'll pace ourselves." They rode north as the sun crested the eastern mountains, Bennett and Rowena on horseback, leading a pack mule loaded with tools. The morning air was crisp, clean, the kind of air that made a man's lungs feel new. Bennett tried to enjoy it, tried not to think about how much depended on the next few hours, the next few days, the next 4 weeks. "You ever done this before?" Rowena asked, breaking the silence. "Gold mining?" "Yeah." Bennett shook his head. "Saw it done. In Colorado after the war. Prospectors everywhere. But I never tried it myself." "Me neither," Rowena admitted. "Ezekiel did it for a few weeks. Came back with gold dust and stories. Mostly stories." They reached the canyon as the sun hit the upper ridges. Dismounted. Unloaded the mule. 2 shovels. 3 gold pans. 2 buckets. A pick. A sieve. Tools for moving earth. For finding gold. For saving their lives. "Where do we start?" Bennett asked. Rowena pointed to where the creek bent, where water had carved a small pool. "Ezekiel said gold settles in the bends, in the quiet water, gets trapped by the rocks." They waded into the creek. The water was shockingly cold, mountain runoff, snowmelt from peaks that stayed white year-round. Bennett's feet went numb almost immediately. "This is going to be miserable," he said. "Probably," Rowena agreed. "Let's get started." The first hour was brutal, shoveling gravel from the creek bed, panning it in the frigid water, finding nothing but rocks and sand. Bennett's hands cramped from the cold. His back protested the constant bending. His knees ached from kneeling in the streambed. Rowena worked beside him, silent, focused, her movements economical. Practiced. She'd done hard labor before. It showed. "Nothing," Bennett said, dumping another pan of worthless gravel. "Keep going," Rowena replied, not looking up from her own pan. They kept going, 2nd hour, 3rd hour. The sun climbed higher, warmed the air but not the water. Bennett's hands were raw, red, bleeding in places where the shovel handle had rubbed. Still nothing, just rocks, sand, disappointment. "Maybe there's nothing here," he said, around hour 4. Rowena finally stopped, looked at him. "Maybe," she admitted, "but we can't afford to assume that, not yet." She dumped her pan, scooped fresh gravel, swirled the water, and froze. "Bennett." Her voice was different, tight, excited. Bennett waded over, looked into her pan. There, at the bottom, mixed with the black sand. Gold. Not much. Just a few tiny flakes. But unmistakable. Real. "We found it," Rowena breathed. Bennett felt something unclench in his chest. "We found it," he echoed. "Right." They worked with renewed energy after that. Found a rhythm. Bennett shoveling gravel into buckets, Rowena panning it out, saving the black sand that held the gold. Slowly. Painstakingly slowly. The gold dust accumulated. By the time the sun started dropping toward the western ridges, they had maybe half an ounce. Maybe. "How much is that worth?" Bennett asked, his voice hoarse from not speaking for hours. "Maybe $20, Rowena said. "If we're lucky, $20. After 10 hours of backbreaking work, they needed $2,700. Bennett did the math, felt his hope crumble. "At this rate, we'd need—" "I know," Rowena interrupted. "Don't say it, I know." They packed up as twilight settled over the canyon, rode back to the farm in silence, both too exhausted to talk, too discouraged to pretend otherwise. Cora and Marin had dinner waiting, stew, bread, coffee that tasted like salvation. "How'd it go?" Marin asked, though her expression said she already knew. "We found gold," Rowena said, setting a small vial on the table, the gold dust barely visible at the bottom. Cora picked it up, held it to the lamplight. "Is this all?" "That's all." The silence that followed was crushing. Tomorrow will be better, Bennett said, not believing it. We'll work faster, dig deeper, find richer deposits. Nobody responded, because they all knew $20 a day wouldn't save them, not even close. But they tried anyway. The next day, Cora and Marin took the canyon shift, came back with even less, maybe $15 worth. The day after, Bennett and Rowena tried again. $25. Better, but not nearly enough. The days blurred together. Dig, pan, find tiny amounts of gold, collapse into bed, wake up and do it again. Bennett's hands became calloused. Then the calluses broke open. Then they healed into harder calluses. His back developed a permanent ache. His knees protested every morning, but they kept working, because stopping meant losing everything. A week passed. They'd accumulated maybe $300 in gold. 300 out of 2,700 needed, and 3 weeks left. It's not enough, Marin said one evening, staring at their collection of gold dust. We're not going to make it. We have to make it, Cora insisted. Wanting something doesn't make it happen, Marin shot back. Then what do you suggest? Rowena's voice was sharp, tired. Give up, hand everything to Magnus. I'm suggesting we face reality. Reality is, we keep working. The tension in the kitchen was thick enough to cut. Bennett stood, walked outside, needed air, needed space, needed to think. Cora followed him out. They stood on the porch, looking at stars that didn't care about their problems. She's scared, Cora said quietly. Marin, she's just scared. We're all scared, Bennett replied. But she shows it differently, gets angry instead of quiet. Bennett nodded, understanding that. How do you show it? He asked. Cora was quiet for a moment. I get practical, she said finally. I make lists, plan, organize, pretend that if I just think hard enough I can solve any problem. Can you solve this one? Cora shook her head. I don't think so, she admitted. I don't think we can dig enough gold in 3 weeks. The math doesn't work. Bennett's stomach sank. Hearing it said out loud, by someone as practical and honest as Cora, made it real. Then what do we do? He asked. Cora turned to face him. We keep trying anyway, she said, because that's what decent people do. They try even when the odds are impossible. She went back inside, left Bennett alone with the stars and his thoughts, and the crushing weight of probable failure. The second week was worse than the first. A storm rolled in. Rain that turned the Canyon Creek into a torrent, made gold mining impossible for 3 days. 3 days they couldn't afford to lose. They spent those days on the farm instead, maintaining, repairing, preparing, and getting to know each other. Really know each other. On the second day of rain, Bennett found Rowena in the barn, repairing tack. He sat down across from her, picked up a bridle that needed mending, started working without asking. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just the sound of rain on the roof, the smell of leather and hay. Can I ask you something? Bennett said eventually. You can ask, Rowena replied. Doesn't mean I'll answer. How did you end up here in this valley? Rowena's hands stilled on the leather. Long story. We've got time. She considered, then nodded. I grew up in Kansas, she said. Farm family, decent people. But my father died when I was 16. Mother couldn't run the place alone. We lost it. She pulled the stitching tight. I worked whatever jobs I could find. Cleaning, cooking, farm labor. Saved every penny. Thought maybe I could buy land someday. Start over. What changed? I met Ezekiel. Rowena's voice went flat. Charming, handsome, said all the right things, told me about this valley, this opportunity, promised partnership, promised family. She set down the bridle. I believed him. Gave him all my savings. $1,200, everything I had. He said he'd match it, buy this land, make us both owners. But he didn't. He bought the land with my money, Rowena said. Put only his name on the deed. When I objected, he said it was just a formality, that we were partners in spirit even if not on paper. Her hands clenched. I was stupid enough to believe him. Bennett shook his head. You weren't stupid. You were trusting. There's a difference. Rowena looked at him, something soft in her expression. Thank you for saying that. They went back to work, but something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding, a recognition of shared wounds. That evening, Marin cornered Bennett in the barn, literally cornered him, blocked the door with her substantial frame. We need to talk, she said. Bennett set down the hay fork. About what? About what happens if we don't make it. Marin's voice was intense. If we can't pay Magnus. Bennett didn't want to have this conversation, but Marin wasn't giving him a choice. What about it? I need to know you won't just leave, Marin said. When Magnus comes, when he takes the farm, I need to know you'll stay. Help us, even if everything falls apart. Bennett met her eyes, green, fierce, vulnerable beneath the anger. I'll stay, he said simply. Promise. I promise. Marin studied him, searching for lies, for weakness. Found neither, apparently. Okay, she said, stepping aside. Okay. She left. Bennett stood in the barn, wondering what he'd just committed to, and realizing he meant it, even if they lost everything. He'd stay, help them somehow, because walking away now would make him no better than Ezekiel. And Bennett Ash had seen enough of bad men. He wouldn't become one. The third day of rain finally broke. They rode back to the canyon, found the creek transformed, higher, faster, clearer, and potentially richer. Stormwater moves things around, Cora said, studying the streambed. Might have exposed new deposits. They worked with desperate energy, shoveling gravel from new locations, panning water that ran swift and cold, and found better returns. $40 that day, $50 the next, $60 the day after that. Hope flickered back to life. Maybe, just maybe, if they could maintain this pace, if they worked every waking hour, if nothing else went wrong, they might make it. But something always goes wrong. On the 15th day, Bennett woke to shouting, ran downstairs to find Cora at the window. Riders, she said. 5 of them. Bennett's blood went cold. Magnus, 2 weeks early. He grabbed his rifle. Rowena and Marin appeared, also armed. Stay calm, Rowena said. Don't shoot unless they shoot first. The riders came into the yard. 5 rough-looking men. The leader was massive, over 6 feet, heavy, scarred face. Magnus Greer. Had to be. They dismounted, slow, deliberate, making a show of it. Magnus walked to the porch, smiled, showed teeth that had seen better days. Well now, he said, his voice like gravel. Looks like we got ourselves a whole welcoming party. You're early, Rowena said, her rifle held casual but ready. Debt's not due for 2 weeks. Just checking on my investment, Magnus replied, making sure you folks are taking good care of my land. It's not your land, Bennett said, stepping forward. It's mine. Legal deed, legal purchase. Magnus's eyes shifted to him. Evaluated. Dismissed. You must be the new fool, Magnus said. The one Ezekiel sold to. I'm the owner, Bennett corrected. Owner of debt, maybe, Magnus laughed. You got my money ready? We'll have it when it's due. Will you now? Magnus looked around the yard, at the farm, the barn, the fields. Because from where I'm standing, this place doesn't look like it's generating $6,500. That's not your concern, Rowena said. Everything about this property is my concern. Magnus took a step closer. See, I got rights here. First rights to all production, all sales. You try to move cattle without my say-so. That's theft. Bennett's grip tightened on his rifle. We know the terms, he said. Do you? Magnus smiled again. Because I'm thinking maybe you're planning something. Maybe working that old gold deposit up north. Maybe thinking you can pay me off and be done. How did he know about the gold? Bennett's face must have shown his surprise, because Magnus laughed. You think Ezekiel didn't tell me everything? Every inch of this land, every possible resource. He shook his head. I know about the gold. I know how much is up there. About $800 worth. Maybe 1,000 if you're lucky, and work yourself to death. He leaned against the porch railing. So even with that, even selling every cow, every bushel of wheat, you'll still be short. He let that sink in. Which means in 2 weeks this farm is mine, and you 4. He looked at each of them. You're mine too. We'll see about that, Marin said. Magnus straightened. Yes, he agreed. We will. He mounted his horse. The others followed. 2 weeks, Magnus called as they rode out. Have my money or have your bags packed. Yeah. They watched until the riders disappeared. Then Rowena lowered her rifle. Her hands were shaking. He's right, she said quietly. Even with everything, we're short. Bennett did the math in his head. 800 in gold if they were lucky, maybe 3,000 for the cattle. 1,200 for early wheat if they could harvest and sell fast. 5,000 total, still short 1,500. 1,500 they had no way to get. There has to be something, Cora said. Something we're missing. But none of them could think of what. That night, they barely slept. Bennett lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through options, discarding them one by one, borrow from someone else, who they were 3 days from anyone, and nobody loaned money to desperate people. Rob Magnus, insane, illegal, would get them all killed or jailed. Run, leave everything, start over somewhere else. But that would leave the women with nothing, would make Bennett as bad as Ezekiel. No, he couldn't do that, wouldn't do that. But he didn't know what else to do. A soft knock on his door. "Come in," he said. Rowena entered, wearing her nightdress, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different like this, softer, younger, vulnerable. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. Bennett sat up. Too much thinking. "Thinking without solutions," Rowena said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "The worst kind." They sat in silence, the house quiet around them. "I'm sorry," Rowena said finally. "For what? For dragging you into this. For trapping you with that contract. For—" "Stop," Bennett interrupted. "You didn't drag me into anything. I chose to stay. You didn't have all the information. I had enough." Bennett met her eyes. "I knew about the debt. I knew about Magnus. I chose to stay anyway." Rowena's expression crumpled, just for a moment. Then she got it under control. "Why?" she whispered. Bennett thought about that, about all the reasons, the complicated tangle of them. "Because I was tired of running," he said. "Because you all deserved better than Ezekiel. Because—" He paused. "Because somewhere in the last 2 weeks this stopped being just about saving a farm. It became about saving a family." Rowena's eyes went bright, wet. "We're not your family." "Maybe not by blood," Bennett agreed, "but by choice. By shared struggle. I think maybe you are." A tear escaped, rolled down Rowena's cheek. She wiped it away, angry. "Damn it," she muttered. "I don't cry." Bennett smiled slightly. "Your secret's safe with me." Rowena laughed, wet, shaky, but real. She stood, moved toward the door, paused, turned back, crossed the room in 3 quick strides, kissed Bennett. Hard, fierce, desperate. He responded without thinking, pulled her closer. The kiss lasted maybe 10 seconds. Felt like longer. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I shouldn't have done that," Rowena said. "No," Bennett agreed. "The companionship clause has nothing to do with this." Rowena searched his face. "Doesn't it?" Bennett shook his head. "This is just us, 2 people who care about each other, separate from any contract." Rowena smiled, small but genuine. "I do care about you, Bennett Ash. I care about you too, Rowena Blackwood." She left then, closed the door quiet behind her. Bennett lay back down, his heart still racing, his mind even more unsettled than before. But somewhere under all the chaos, a warmth, a connection, something real, something worth fighting for. The next morning, Bennett made a decision, gathered everyone at breakfast. "We're going to try something different," he announced. 3 women looked at him, waiting. "Instead of splitting up, we all go to the canyon, all 4 of us, work together, move more gravel, cover more ground." "What about the farm?" Cora asked. "We do farm work early morning and late evening, use every hour of daylight at the canyon." "That's brutal," Marin said. "So is losing everything," Bennett replied. They looked at each other. Rowena nodded first. "Let's do it." The new schedule was punishing. Up at 4 in the morning, feed animals, water crops, handle urgent repairs, ride to the canyon by 6, work until sunset, ride back, handle evening chores, collapse into bed, sleep 4 hours if they were lucky, wake up and do it again. But it worked. 4 people working together moved 4 times the gravel, found 4 times the gold. The returns improved dramatically. $100 a day, $150. With 10 days left, they'd accumulated $2,000 in gold, combined with cattle and wheat. They might, just might, actually make it. Hope became something more than a fragile flicker. It became a real possibility. The work brought them closer. 4 people suffering together, bleeding together, laughing together when someone slipped in the creek or dropped a pan of already processed gravel, crying together when the exhaustion became too much. Bennett watched Cora work with quiet determination, never complaining, just steady, reliable. watched Marin push herself past reasonable limits, her competitive nature refusing to quit even when her body screamed, watched Rowena lead without dominating, encouraging, praising, keeping spirits up when hope flagged, and somewhere in all that work and suffering, Bennett fell in love, not with one of them, with all of them, with their strength, their resilience, their refusal to give up, with the way Cora hummed while she worked, the way Marin cursed colorfully when she found gold, the way Rowena smiled when they hit their daily goal. He fell in love with the family they'd become, against all odds, against all logic, a family. 5 days before the deadline, disaster struck. They were working a promising section of creek, moving gravel fast, finding good color. Bennett was waist-deep in water, shoveling gravel into buckets, didn't see the deadfall log upstream, didn't see it break loose from where it had been wedged, didn't see it coming until Rowena screamed. Bennett. He turned. The log hit him, knocked him off his feet. Underwater, tumbling. Can't breathe, can't see. Slammed into rocks. Pain exploded in his ribs, his head, then hands grabbing him, pulling, dragging. He broke the surface, gasping, choking. The women hauled him to the bank, laid him out on the gravel. Bennett, Rowena's voice, panicked. Bennett, can you hear me? He coughed, water and blood. I'm okay, he managed. You're bleeding, Cora said. Bennett looked down. His shirt was torn, a gash across his ribs. Deep, not deadly, but not good. We need to get him back to the house, Marin said. We need to keep working, Bennett protested, trying to sit up. The world spun. He lay back down. You're done for today, Rowena said, her tone brooking no argument. Maybe tomorrow, too. We can't afford to lose you either. They got him on a horse somehow, rode back to the farm. Cora cleaned and bandaged the wound. Marin made him drink something that tasted like poison but eased the pain. Rowena sat beside his bed, holding his hand. You scared me, she said quietly. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't die. Bennett squeezed her hand. Wasn't planning on it. She smiled, but her eyes were wet. Rest, she said. We'll handle tomorrow. Bennett wanted to argue, to insist he'd be fine, but his body had other ideas. He fell asleep still holding her hand. He woke the next morning to voices downstairs. Angry voices, male voices. Bennett sat up. Pain lanced through his ribs. He ignored it, grabbed his rifle, made his way downstairs. Found 3 men in the kitchen. Not Magnus's men. Different. Harder. Meaner. Rowena, Cora, and Marin backed against the far wall. The leader turned when Bennett appeared, smiled. Well now, he said. The man of the house. Bennett leveled his rifle. Get out. The man laughed. Friendly sort, aren't you? He gestured to his companions. We're just here on business, collecting a debt. We don't owe you anything, Rowena said. Not you directly, the man agreed. But see, Magnus Greer sold us certain rights, collection rights, for debts more than 30 days overdue. The debt isn't due for 4 more days, Bennett said. Technical details. The man waved it away. Point is, Magnus wants to make sure his interests are protected. Sent us to secure the property, make sure nothing disappears before payments due. You mean he sent you to intimidate us? Marin spat. Such harsh words. The man's smile widened. We're just here to observe, make sure no cattle get sold off quiet-like, no gold goes missing. He looked at Bennett. You can put the rifle down. We're not here to fight, just to watch. Bennett didn't lower the rifle. You can watch from outside. The man's smile faded. Don't make this difficult. I'm making it clear, Bennett said. This is my property. You're trespassing. Leave now or I'll remove you. Tension filled the kitchen. Thick. Dangerous. The man evaluated Bennett. Saw something in his eyes. Something that suggested Bennett had killed before. Would kill again if pushed. Fine, the man said, stepping back. We'll camp outside. Keep watch from there, but we're not leaving. They filed out. Slammed the door. Bennett lowered the rifle, his hands shaking, not from fear, from rage. He can't do this, Cora said. Apparently he can, Rowena replied. Marin looked out the window, at the 3 men setting up camp in their yard. What do we do? Bennett set the rifle down. We keep working, he said. We don't let them stop us. But having Magnus's men watching made everything harder. They couldn't go to the canyon without being followed, couldn't move gold without being observed, couldn't do anything without hostile eyes tracking their every move. The psychological pressure was enormous, crushing. Bennett pushed through anyway, ribs bandaged tight, head still aching, but working, because stopping meant losing, and he refused to lose. 3 days before the deadline, they'd accumulated $4,800 in gold. Combined with cattle sales they'd managed, $6,200 total, 300 short. So close, so impossibly close. "We can sell personal items," Cora suggested. "Jewelry, anything valuable." Rowena pulled out a locket. Gold, her mother's. "This might bring $50. Marin contributed a ring. Cora had nothing, just the clothes on her back. Bennett thought about his rifle, custom made, worth maybe $200, but needed for protection. "There has to be something else," he said. They sat around the kitchen table, exhausted, desperate, running out of time. Then Rowena stood, walked to her room, came back carrying a wooden box, opened it. Inside was a necklace, heavy gold chain, ornate, valuable. "This was my mother's," she said quietly. "The last thing I have of her." She set it on the table. "Should bring at least 300, maybe more." Cora gasped. "Rowena, no, you can't." "I can," Rowena said. "If it saves us, if it keeps us together, then it's worth it." She looked at Bennett. "Family isn't about keeping treasures. It's about protecting the people you love." Bennett felt something break open in his chest. This woman, this incredible, strong, beautiful woman, willing to sacrifice everything, for them, for him. He stood, crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. She melted into him, clung tight. "We'll get it back," he promised. "Somehow, someday, we'll buy it back." Rowena nodded against his chest. "I know," she whispered, but they both knew it was probably a lie. Some things once lost, stay lost forever. 2 days before the deadline, Bennett rode to Blackwater, sold the necklace to a jeweler, got $400 for it, highway robbery. The thing was worth twice that, but he had no leverage, no time. He took the $400, rode back. 1 day before the deadline, they had everything ready, $6,600, $100 more than needed, just in case, just to be absolutely certain. They barely slept that night, all 4 of them sitting in the main room, watching the clock, waiting for dawn, waiting for Magnus, waiting for the moment that would decide everything. "Whatever happens," Rowena said, around 3 in the morning, "I want you all to know, this month, working with you, fighting with you, it's been the best month of my life." Cora nodded. "Mine too." Marin wiped her eyes. "Same." They looked at Bennett. "I came here looking for isolation," he said. "Turns out what I needed was family, and you gave me that, all of you." Rowena took his hand. Cora took his other hand. Marin completed the circle. 4 people, bound together, by struggle, by sacrifice, by something deeper than contracts, by love. "We're going to be okay," Bennett said. "All of us, together." Dawn came, and with it, Magnus Greer, Shak. Magnus arrived at noon, not dawn like Bennett expected. Noon, which meant they spent the morning in agony, waiting. Every sound made them jump, every shadow made them tense. The 3 men Magnus had sent to watch them stood in the yard, arms crossed, smirking. They knew something, something the 4 inside didn't. Bennett stood at the window, watching the road. His rifle leaned against the wall beside him. Not that it would help. Magnus had 8 men, maybe more, and killing Magnus would just transfer the debt to someone else, someone potentially worse. Behind him, Rowena paced, back and forth across the kitchen. Her hand kept drifting to her neck, to where her mother's necklace used to hang, finding nothing, the loss hitting her fresh each time. Cora sat at the table, counting the money again, as if the numbers might change, as if 6,600 might magically become 7,000. It didn't. It never would. Marin sharpened her knife, the scrape of metal on stone, rhythmic, hypnotic, probably unnecessary. The knife was already sharp enough to shave with, but her hands needed something to do, something to keep them from shaking. "He's late," Cora said, for the 10th time. "He knows," Rowena replied, also for the 10th time. "He's making us sweat." "It's working," Marin muttered. Bennett turned from the window, looked at the 3 women who'd become his entire world in just 4 weeks. 4 weeks. Was that all it had been? It felt like a lifetime. Felt like he'd known them forever, fought beside them forever, loved them forever. Whatever happens, he said, we face it together. Rowena stopped pacing, met his eyes. Together, she agreed. Cora nodded. Together. Marin set down her knife. Together. The word felt like a promise, like an oath, like something that would hold even if everything else fell apart. Then, finally, dust on the road, riders approaching, more than before. Bennett counted quickly. 10. No. 12. Magnus had brought an army. Why so many? Cora whispered. Because he can, Rowena said bitterly. They walked outside, the four of them, standing on the porch, united, facing whatever came next. Magnus led the group, massive on his horse, making the animal look small beneath him. He dismounted with surprising grace for a man his size. His boots hit the dirt with a sound like thunder. Well now, he said, that smile spreading across his scarred face. Judgment Day. Bennett stepped forward. We have your money. $6,600, 100 over the amount owed. Magnus's eyebrows rose, mockingly surprised. Do you now? Every cent. Bennett gestured to Rowena. She held up the leather satchel, heavy with gold dust and coin, the weight of 4 weeks' suffering, 4 weeks' blood, 4 weeks' hope. Then let's count it, Magnus said. But he didn't move toward them, didn't gesture for the money, just stood there, smiling like a cat with a mouse. What's wrong? Rowena asked, her voice tight, controlled, but Bennett heard the fear underneath. Wrong. Magnus spread his hands. Innocent. Nothing's wrong. I'm just surprised. Didn't think you had it in you. Thought you'd fold 2 weeks ago. Give up. Beg for mercy. We don't beg, Marin said. Magnus's smile widened. No, I can see that. You're fighters, all of you. Stubborn, determined. He shook his head. Admirable, really. Most folks would have quit. We're not most folks, Bennett said. No, Magnus agreed. You're not. Which brings me to a problem. He pulled a paper from his coat, unfolded it with deliberate care, taking his time, making them wait, making them suffer. Bennett's stomach dropped. He knew. Before Magnus even spoke. He knew. This was the trap, the final twist, the knife in the back they should have seen coming. Keek. See, Magnus continued. While you were busy digging for gold, breaking your backs up in that canyon, my lawyer was reviewing the loan documents. He held up the paper. And he found something interesting. No. No, no, no. Not now. Not when they were so close. The interest clause, Magnus said, reading from the paper. Section 12, subsection C, clearly states that any payment received after the designated time incurs a penalty of 15%, compounded daily. The world tilted. Bennett grabbed the porch railing. Needed something solid, something real, because this couldn't be happening. The payment isn't late, he said, his voice coming from somewhere far away. It's due today. We're paying today. Ah. Magnus looked up from the paper. But that's the thing. The payment was due at sunrise. Dawn. First light. Says so right here. He tapped the document. Any payment received after dawn is considered late. He checked his pocket watch. Gold. Expensive. Probably bought with money stolen from people like them. It's now 12 minutes past noon, which makes you approximately 7 hours late. Rowena's legs buckled. Cora caught her, kept her upright. Marin's knife clattered to the porch. Bennett couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. At 15% daily, Magnus continued, compounded over 7 hours, that's an additional $975 owed. He folded the paper, put it back in his coat, plus the original $6,500. Comes to $7,475 total. Silence. The kind of silence that comes before an avalanche, before a building collapses, before everything ends. That's not legal, Rowena said, finally finding her voice. You never mentioned dawn, never said anything about... Didn't have to, Magnus interrupted. It's in the contract, black and white, legal and binding. He gestured to the satchel. You're welcome to count out what you have, apply it to the debt, but you'll still be short. By how much? Bennett asked, though he already knew, already felt the answer like a weight on his chest. $875, Magnus said, give or take. So close. They'd come so close, worked so hard, sacrificed so much, for nothing. We can get the rest, Bennett said, desperate now. Give us 2 more days. We'll dig more gold. Can't do it, Magnus said, shaking his head. Contract's clear, full payment including penalties due today, or the property transfers to me, immediately. You're a thief, Marin spat. Magnus didn't flinch. I'm a businessman, and this, he gestured to the farm, this is business. Bennett's vision went red. His hand moved toward his rifle. Magnus's men all shifted. 12 rifles came up, pointing at them, at the women, at everything Bennett cared about. I wouldn't, Magnus said softly. Bennett's hand stopped, shaking, hovering near the weapon, knowing he could grab it, could kill Magnus, could die immediately after, could watch the women die too, or worse, be taken alive by these animals. Bennett, Rowena said, quiet, firm. Don't. He can't take you, Bennett said, not looking at her, eyes locked on Magnus. He already has. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Magnus owned them now, the farm, the women, everything, because of a clause buried in small print, because of a trick, because of greed and cruelty and a system that rewarded men like Magnus. I'm giving you 1 hour, Magnus said, to gather your personal belongings and vacate. He turned to his men. Start taking inventory. I want to know everything on this property. The men dismounted, started walking toward the barn, the house, their house. Bennett's hands clenched into fists, helpless, useless, unable to protect the people he loved. Wait! The voice came from behind them, old, weathered, but carrying authority. Bennett turned. An elderly man stood at the edge of the yard, white hair, wire-rimmed spectacles, priest's collar, riding a horse that looked as old as he was. Who the hell are you? Magnus demanded. Father Thomas Whitfield. The old priest dismounted, stiff, slow, but determined. And I'm here to stop this theft. Magnus laughed. Theft, I'm collecting a legal debt. A debt based on fraud, Father Thomas said. He pulled papers from his saddlebag. I have documentation, proof that you deliberately misled these people about the payment terms. He walked forward, each step measured, painful probably, but steady. I've been investigating you, Magnus Greer, for the past 6 months. Ever since I heard what you did to the Morrison family, and the Hendersons before them, and the Weavers before them. Magnus's smile faded. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Father Thomas held up his papers. I have signed statements from 12 different families, all of whom you lent money to, all of whom you trapped with hidden clauses, dawn payment deadlines, compounding interest, impossible terms buried in small print. He looked at Bennett, at the women. You're not the first people Magnus has done this to, but if I have anything to say about it, you'll be the last. Hope flickered in Bennett's chest, small, fragile, but real. Those statements mean nothing, Magnus said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. They mean everything to a judge, Father Thomas replied. And Circuit Judge Morrison will be in Blackwater in 3 days. I've already filed a formal complaint, charging you with fraud, with predatory lending, with deliberate misrepresentation. Magnus's jaw clenched. The judge won't see it. My lawyer will. Your lawyer is being investigated too, Father Thomas interrupted. For falsifying documents, for backdating contracts, for conspiracy. The old priest stepped closer to Magnus. Your schemes are over. The law is coming for you. For a long moment, nobody moved. Magnus stared at Father Thomas. The old priest stared back, unflinching, despite being outnumbered, despite facing a man who could crush him, despite everything. Then Magnus laughed, not his usual confident laugh. This one was bitter, defeated. The law, always the law, as if law ever mattered out here. It matters when good people make it matter, Father Thomas said. Magnus shook his head. You know what your problem is, priest. You believe in justice, in fairness, in people getting what they deserve. He gestured to the farm. But that's not how the world works. The world rewards the strong, the ruthless, the clever. No, Bennett said, stepping forward. The world rewards the decent, the brave, the ones who stand up. Magnus turned to him. You think you're decent, boy? I think I'm trying to be. And you think that matters? Yes, Bennett said simply. I do. Magnus studied him, really looked at him, at this man who'd worked himself to exhaustion for people he barely knew, who'd sacrificed everything for a family that wasn't his by blood, who stood here now, broken and beaten, but still standing. You're a fool, Magnus said finally. Maybe, Bennett agreed, but I'm a fool with a family. Can you say the same? Something flickered in Magnus's eyes. Pain, Old pain, buried deep. "I had a family once," he said quietly. "Wife, 2 daughters. Lost them to fever. 10 years ago." The admission hung in the air. Unexpected. Raw. "After that," Magnus continued, "I stopped caring. About anything. Anyone. Figured if the world could take everything from me, I'd take everything from the world." He looked at the farm, at Bennett, at the 3 women standing behind him. "But you," Magnus said, "you built something here. In 4 weeks, you built a family, something real, something worth fighting for." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his men. "We're leaving." 12 men stared at him, confused. "Sir," one of them said. "I said we're leaving," Magnus repeated. "The debt is forgiven. The farm belongs to them." Rowena gasped. Cora grabbed her hand. Maren stood frozen. Bennett couldn't process what he was hearing. "You're just giving up?" one of Magnus's men asked. "I'm choosing to be decent," Magnus said. "For once in my miserable life, I'm choosing to do the right thing." He looked at Bennett. "You asked if I have a family. The answer's no. I killed that part of myself when they died. But you," he gestured to the 4 of them, "you're still alive, still capable of love, of building something good." Magnus mounted his horse. "Don't waste it. Don't let grief or anger turn you into someone like me." "Wait," Bennett said. Why change your mind now?" Magnus smiled, sad and genuine. "Because I'm tired. Tired of being the villain. Tired of hurting people. Tired of living in a world where nothing matters." He gathered his reins. "Maybe helping you will matter. Maybe it won't. But at least I'll have tried." He looked at Father Thomas. "The judge can still come. I'll answer for what I've done. But these people," he nodded toward Bennett and the women, "they're free." Magnus rode away, his men following, confused, uncertain, but following, leaving the 4 of them standing in the yard, unable to believe what just happened. Father Thomas walked over, smiling. "Well," he said, "that went better than expected." Bennett started laughing. Couldn't help it. The absurdity, the relief, the sheer impossible luck of it all. Rowena joined him. Then Cora. Then Maren. All 4 of them laughing and crying and holding each other. They'd won. Against all odds. Against impossible circumstances. They'd won. "Thank you," Bennett said to Father Thomas, when he could speak again. The old priest shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank Magnus. He made the choice. I just gave him the opportunity." "Will the judge really come?" Rowena asked. "He will," Father Thomas confirmed. "And Magnus will face consequences, but perhaps lighter ones, given this act of mercy." He climbed back on his horse. "I should go. Long ride back to my parish." "Stay for dinner at least," Cora offered. Father Thomas smiled. "Thank you. But no. You 4 need time. To process. To celebrate. To be together." He tipped his hat. "Build something beautiful here. Build a life worth living. That's the best revenge against men like Magnus used to be." Then he was gone too, riding away into the afternoon, leaving Bennett and the 3 women alone. On their farm. Their home. Their future. They didn't go inside right away, just stood in the yard, holding each other, letting it sink in. The farm was theirs. The debt was gone. Magnus was gone. They were free, finally free. "I can't believe it," Cora whispered. "I keep waiting to wake up," Maren said. Rowena pulled back, looked at Bennett. "You knew. Somehow you knew Magnus would change his mind." Bennett shook his head. "I didn't know anything. I just hoped. Hoped that somewhere under all that cruelty there was still a human being." "And there was," Rowena said. "Barely," Maren muttered. "But yeah, there was." They walked inside. Their house. Sat around the kitchen table. The same table where they'd planned. Worried. Suffered. And now, finally, celebrated. "What do we do now?" Cora asked. Bennett looked around at them. These 3 incredible women. "Now we live. We build. We make this place everything we dreamed it could be." "And us?" Rowena asked quietly. "What about the companionship clause, the contract?" Bennett stood, walked to the fireplace, pulled out the partnership agreement Ezekiel had signed, the one that had started all this, the one that had trapped them, and him. He fed it to the fire, watched it burn, turn to ash, disappear. "No more contracts," he said. "No more obligations. No more forcing anyone to be somewhere they don't choose." He turned to face them. From now on, we're together because we want to be, because we choose each other, every day. That's the only contract that matters." Rowena stood, crossed to him, took his hands in hers. "I choose you, Bennett Ash, not because of a contract, but because you're decent and brave, and you stood by us when you could have run." "I choose you too," Cora said, also standing. "And me," Marin added. Bennett felt something break open in his chest. 4 weeks ago he'd arrived here broken, alone, running from his past, from connection, from anything that might hurt. Now he stood surrounded by family, by love, by a future he'd never imagined possible. "I choose all of you," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Today and every day after." They came together, all 4 of them, arms around each other, holding tight, as if letting go might make this disappear, make it all a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real as the calluses on their hands, as real as the scars on Bennett's ribs, as real as the love growing between them. That night they made dinner together, simple food, stew and bread, but it tasted like victory, like hope, like home. They talked late into the night, about plans for the farm, about spring planting, about buying more cattle, about building additions to the house, about the future they'd almost lost, about the future they'd fought so hard to keep, and slowly, naturally, the conversation turned more intimate, more personal. "Can I ask something?" Cora said, around midnight. "About how this works, between the 4 of us." Bennett set down his coffee. "Ask. Do you—" She struggled for words. "Do you care for all of us equally, or is there one who—" "I love all of you," Bennett interrupted. "Differently, maybe, because you're different people, but equally, yes, absolutely equally." Rowena smiled. "I was worried that you'd choose one of us eventually, that this would fall apart." "Why would I choose?" Bennett asked. "You're a package, a family. I don't love one of you at the expense of the others. I love all of you as a whole." Marin leaned forward. "And you're okay with that? Really, because most men—" "I'm not most men," Bennett said. "The war taught me that family is whoever stands beside you, whoever fights with you, not who you're related to by blood." He looked at each of them. "You 3 stood beside me, fought with me, nearly died with me. That makes you my family, all of you, forever." They talked more, about boundaries, about expectations, about how relationships between 4 people would work. It wasn't simple, wasn't easy, but they were committed to figuring it out. Together. When they finally went to bed, the house felt different, not like 4 people coexisting out of necessity, but like a home, a real home, built on choice, on love, on mutual respect. 2 years passed. The valley looked different in early summer, green, lush, the creek running full from mountain snowmelt. Bennett stood on the porch, watching his daughter Grace toddle across the yard. 18 months old, dark hair like Rowena, curious eyes, fearless. "Careful," Rowena called from the garden, where she was planting beans with Cora. Marin emerged from the barn, wiping her hands. "The new calf is doing fine, strong. Should fetch a good price come fall." They'd expanded the operation. 60 head of cattle now, more land under cultivation. A chicken coop that produced more eggs than they could eat. They sold the surplus to traders, to families passing through, to the growing settlement that had sprung up a day's ride east. The farmhouse had grown too. 2 new rooms, a proper workshop where Cora built furniture to sell, a larger kitchen where they all worked together. Life had settled into a rhythm. Comfortable, productive, full. Grace squealed, chasing a chicken. Bennett smiled, walked down to scoop her up before she caught it. "Got you," he said, lifting her high. She laughed. Pure joy. Rowena joined them, kissed Bennett's cheek, tickled Grace's belly. "Dinner's almost ready." They walked inside together, the 4 adults, the child, a family, not conventional, never would be, but real, and strong, and built on choice. That evening after Grace was asleep, they sat on the expanded porch, watching stars appear. "Father Thomas sent a letter," Cora said. Magnus completed his sentence, moved to California, started a charitable organization, helping widows and orphans. "Good for him," Bennett said, and meant it. "We got an offer on the north pasture," Marin added. "Family wants to homestead, willing to pay fair price." "What do you think?" Rowena asked Bennett. "I think we decide together. Bennett said, like always. They discussed it, weighed options, decided to sell, help the family get started, the way Father Thomas and Magnus had helped them, passing forward the grace they'd received. Later, after Cora and Marin had gone to bed, Bennett and Rowena sat alone. "Happy?" she asked. Bennett looked at the farm, at the life they'd built, at the family they'd chosen. "More than I ever thought possible," he said. Rowena rested her head on his shoulder. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances, who'd built something beautiful from broken pieces. The trap that almost destroyed them had become the door that saved them. The contract that bound them had become the choice that freed them, and four broken people had become one unbreakable family. That was the real miracle. Not that they'd survived, but that they'd thrived. Not that they'd found each other, but that they'd chosen each other, every day, forever, home.